Hey guys, welcome back to Reignited. Now it has been a minute, but I promised you guys that I would do an update on the Twincharged Magnum once we got this thing all set up and complete. And I'm happy to say that we have gotten there. We have finished with the final tuning on this thing, and this thing is absolutely ready to go. Now obviously it still doesn't have a hood on it. I decided I kind of like the way it looks without a hood, so we'll put that on whenever I feel like it. And I would like to do some upgrades down the road, like say to the transmission, rear diff, axles, things like that. But for right now, the vehicle is complete and I'm out driving around having a blast with this thing. I absolutely love the way this car has turned out. Now, some of you may remember that I've always called this car the poor man's Hellcat, because the idea was, could I build a vehicle that had Hellcat equivalent power for much less than the cost of an actual Hellcat? Now we're gonna cover costs in this video. We're also gonna take it to the dyno and to the track to see what it can do for those performance numbers and see if it can match what a Hellcat puts out. Now I don't wanna talk about costs right this second because to be honest, it's a little bit sickening how much money I did put in this thing, but I can assure you it is much less than the cost of a Hellcat. So performance-wise, we're gonna find out later on. For right now, let's go ahead and take this thing for a street drive and see exactly what it's all about. All right, you guys, we're gonna take this thing for a little bit of a spin here. Now, one of the things I did have to sacrifice on this car is the air conditioning. The turbo took up pretty much all of the space where that piping used to be. So it's very hot today, but we gotta have the windows up. I want you guys to get the full experience of what this car is like. Now, one of the interesting things I did with this car is after the 4-inch downpipe where it comes underneath the vehicle, I then routed it into the factory exhaust. Now you say, why in the world would you do that? You're gonna kill a lot of power. Yeah, that is true, but I also killed a lot of noise. This thing literally drives like a stock vehicle when you're just cruising down the road. Now to counteract the power problem, I did install two 2.5-inch electric cutouts on the exhaust that I can open at any time using a key fob, or I can actually do it with my phone. This is from a company called DigiPower, and they built a great product. I really love the way these things work. So let's fire this thing up, take it for a short spin. As you guys can tell, still whisper quiet here inside the cab. Not something I'm really concerned about, except for a message telling me that I have the ESP light on. All right, let's take it for a spin. Now, one of the other things I love about this car is that with the exhaust quiet, all you're getting is intake noise, and you hear all the right kind of noises from this thing. This is probably my favorite part of this car. If I wanted to have an ultra rowdy car that sounded loud, not obnoxious, but just sounded loud and rumbly all the time, I'd take my C10 out instead. Now, if you don't know, I have a 1986 C10 that I also put a 392 Hemi in. Take a listen to this. Now, if you don't know anything about this project, you can always go to my channel and watch the entire series of videos on this thing, see it be built from the ground up, but I'll give you some quick background on it. This is a 2005 Dodge Magnum that I have twin-charged, which means it's both supercharged and turbocharged. Now the engine is a 6.4 liter 2017 engine, SRT. It's fully built, all forged in there. So it is built for boost. It has a fairly mild camshaft in it and not much else done to it. But let's talk about what's cramming all of that air into the system here. Now, on top of the engine here, on top of this custom intake manifold that I built for it, you've got an 0304 Mustang Cobra supercharger, the Eaton M112. That's from the Terminator Cobra. A lot of you will know that name. Now the turbocharger, I'm terrible with turbo specs. I'll put those on the screen now, but I do know that that's an 85mm turbo. So single turbo that starts the process of building that boost. It feeds through an air-to-air intercooler here and then goes into a supercharger where it gets compressed even more to lead to a total boost output of 14 PSI on this thing. Now, I know a lot of you are probably thinking, man, after compressing the air twice, you probably have ridiculously hot air entering that engine, killing a lot of power. And to be honest, I would have said exactly the same thing. But my intake air temps aren't nearly as bad as I anticipated they would be. And that's just one of a couple of different surprises that I've had so far with this setup. I assumed with the twin charging here that the street drivability would be not that great, that it would have really hot air leading into it, and neither of those things is true. This vehicle behaves exactly like a stock vehicle on the road, which you'll see when we do our road test here. This thing is quiet, it is smooth, it's predictable, it's very calm. It's everything I thought that it wouldn't be. So I've been very surprised by that. Now I can already hear a lot of you guys saying too, why did you twin charge this thing? What even is the point of that? Well, to be perfectly honest, there is no point. This was entirely a technical challenge to myself to see if I could do it. I love fabrication, and I just wanted to build something that was interesting and a little bit different from something else. Now, if you think about the actual function behind twin charging something, there is a reason to do this, but generally they did it on rally vehicles that have really small displacement engines, and you throw a supercharger on top of the engine, it makes it act like a much larger engine, which in turn can spool the turbo much quicker than otherwise if it was just relying on the engine itself. A 392 is not exactly a small displacement engine. I don't really need that extra punch to get this turbo going, but let me tell you, the concept works even with such a large displacement engine as this. That was another thing that really actually surprised me about this setup, is that the theory still works. This supercharger hits hard, and then you get the turbo spooling in and away you go. It's actually fairly seamless too. So like I said, couldn't be happier with how this system has turned out. Now, obviously, it's not going to be 100% perfect. One of the things I'm still struggling with on this car is the belt setup on here. I have been through 10 different revisions on here, and none of them has been right, obviously, since I'm still working on it. What we have here is probably the closest I've gotten so far, but under hard acceleration, you will still hear a little bit of belt slip. So that'll be something I will be continuing to develop, because belt slip is something that just irritates the heck out of me. So I want to resolve that issue and get this thing working 1000% perfectly. However, you will hear that on the street drive. So don't say, oh man, your belt's slipping. I know it is. It's driving me crazy. I will fix it. Now, when I originally built this car, I built it with a 5.7 liter. Now, it was from 2015, so it's still a newer style, but it wasn't forged or anything like that. It was just a stock bottom end. I had a few of those engines lying around. I'm like, why not start with this and see where I go? And I was trying to get this thing tuned on my own. Now, in the result of that, I blew up 2 engines in the course of a week. Again, watch the videos, you'll see the details on that. All right, so guys, you know, I went ahead and deleted the MDS on this engine, so I have these plugs installed here, but I decided that for fuel mileage reasons, I'd really like to make this thing a 4-cylinder again. Check it out. Now, if you're wondering, yes, I am going to start offering some tuning classes very soon to show you guys how you can achieve these exact same results and get the same kind of fuel mileage as I am. Well, I do believe something is missing here. Snap the end of the piston clean off of the rod there. And yeah, this cylinder is completely torched. And it almost looks like I actually dropped a valve here, because this valve head is completely gone. It's probably in the pan somewhere, snapped off, but it's impossible to say, because if that piston tore off of there, then essentially it could have just smashed the valve, ripped the head off, and caused all sorts of problems. But it's interesting that the problem seems to be relegated to cylinder number 2 only. Found my number 2 piston. Yeah, I don't think it was going to survive. But it was pretty clear to me that I needed to bring the professionals in here. So with that in mind, I've been working with Adam down at the Shed Tuning and Performance in Houston, Texas. He's been helping me with remote tuning this car, and it has been absolutely fantastic. We've been going back and forth. He's changing little stuff here and there, and now we finally come to this point where I actually feel confident about stepping on the throttle here, going wide open throttle, and just holding it there. Now, we've made changes to not just the engine, but also the transmission as well. This is a stock transmission in this car. I'm actually running a little experiment here to see just how much this stock transmission will take before it lets go. If you guys don't know, I am a Dodge technician for a living, and transmissions are my specialty, so I'm really not that concerned if I blow this transmission up. I kind of just want to see what it'll take first. But again, getting back to Adam, he's done an absolutely spectacular job. So if you guys need to have your Hemi vehicle tuned, I'm gonna go ahead and put the link up here in the corner and also down in the description below. Get a hold of him. Like I said, he's been fantastic to work with. And to be honest, he's gone above and beyond what I expected for what I paid. I thought, it'd just be like a couple of times back and forth. No, he's been really consistent about getting back to me quickly and offering up another revision, thinking of things on his own. So it's been a great experience, guys. Go check him out. All right, let's give you guys a feel for how it sounds with the cutouts open. Now, as far as the fuel system goes, we are running a DW400 pump in the back of this thing on a Deechworks custom hanger setup in there. We are also running a Deechworks fuel pressure regulator. I have custom made the fuel rails on here, and we're running a set of stock Hellcat injectors. Like I said, the goal here was to make Hellcat-ish power, so I figured the Hellcat injectors would be just fine, especially seems how we are staying with pump gas. A lot of people are saying you need to be switching over to ethanol. That might be something I look to in the future, but the reality is I would have to change a lot of components to do that, and also I just don't want to. This car sits a lot. It's going to sit the entire winter time. It snows a lot where I live in the winter time, so this car is going to sit for 6 months straight. I don't want ethanol sitting on all these lines, eating everything up, and then I have to deal with that every single summer. I'm fine with pump gas because I'm not here looking to break records. I'm not trying to make insane power out of this thing. All I want is Hellcat-ish power. That's what I was after. Again, the technical challenge was really all I care about, so that was my goal. I think pump gas is going to be just fine for this thing. So those are the basics of the build, but I have to admit, there's a lot of other really interesting stuff about this car, really unique stuff that I had to do to make this all work. So again, I highly recommend that you go check out that whole build series on the channel. I'll go ahead and link that up here to watch that. So now you guys know what this car is like on the street, but what does that really mean anyway? I mean, pretty much every car out there can do a burnout, right? We need some hard data here. We need some numbers. How much power does this thing actually make? Well, we're headed over to the dyno right now to get those numbers for you guys. And to be honest, I'm pretty curious myself. But first, you guys, before we get to the dyno, there's something really exciting I want to talk to you guys about. Now, this came across my email recently, and I thought there's no way I couldn't put this in this video to let you guys know about it. Now, let's say you guys have a 5.7 or a 6.4 Hemi engine and you want to have your own Hellcat equivalent horsepower vehicle. Well, what are your options? Well, if you don't have the skills to fabricate like this, pretty much your only other option is to buy an expensive aftermarket Whipple supercharger setup, which they're fantastic, no question about it, but they cost quite a bit of money. Is there a more budget alternative out there? Well, CFR Performance has got you covered because they came out with a kit that allows you to adapt a factory Hellcat blower to your 2011 and later 5.7 or 6.4 Hemi engine. Now, I can already hear a lot of you guys saying, well, why would you have to adapt it anyway? Doesn't the Hellcat blower bolt directly to a 5.7 or 6.4 engine? And the answer is no, it does not. The Hellcat cylinder heads are actually different, and that intake bolt pattern is totally different from what the other engines have. That's why with the CFR Performance kit, you have these really beautiful adapter plates so that you can then bolt that Hellcat blower directly to your engine. Now, they do offer these plates separately by themselves, or you can buy it as an entire kit because they've done the really hard work here. They've done all the R&D, and they actually have bracketry and pulleys here that set it up to where you can run it, just bolt the blower directly onto the engine and use a custom sized belt, which I'll list down below, and it'll just slip right on there and you'll be ready to go. Now, the kit comes with these pulleys here. It comes with some adapters, comes with hardware, Also some stuff for the blower itself. So it's actually a pretty complete kit for getting this blower on your engine. Now, I don't want to undersell this job here. It's not as simple as just slapping a blower on your engine, putting on these pulleys, and then you drive away. Now, obviously there's going to be more to it than that. Specifically, the blower has an intercooler system built into it. So you're going to need to run some coolant lines to a heat exchanger out front of your vehicle. You'll need an electric pump to run that coolant. You'll need a little expansion tank for that coolant to actually go into. And also, you have to think about tuning as well. Obviously, some custom tuning will have to be done. So definitely not as easy as just slapping the blower on your engine, but they have done all the hard work here with this R&D to make this setup work. And importantly, no fabrication is involved to this point. So really, that's the benefit of this system. But here's the really interesting part. CFR Performance has been really cool. And I said, hey, do you guys have another kit that you'd be willing to give away to one of my viewers? And they said, absolutely, we'd love to do that. So here's your guys' chance to get your hands on one of these kits. Now, I really want this kit to go to someone who's actually going to use it. So please don't enter this unless you think there's a possibility that at some point in the future, you'll actually be able to use this kit, because that would just be really cool to actually see it functional on a vehicle. So here's what you need to do to enter here. It's completely free. All you have to do is email me direct, sales@reignitedtx.com, and give me your name, the type of vehicle that you have, and go ahead and give me a little short story about why this car is important to you, what it means to you. Maybe it was the way that you purchased it, maybe it has a connection to your family. Tell me about what you were planning on doing to the car in the future, or just something along those lines. Then I'm gonna take those entries and I'm gonna pass those on to CFR Performance, and they're going to be the ones picking the winner and sending that kit out to you guys. Now, we're gonna go ahead and set this up to where a month from the date that this video is posted is how long this will be active. And then after that, we're going to pick the winner and inform them and get it sent out to them. All right, you guys, I hope you're excited about this. I know I am. I can't wait to have an opportunity to put this kit on a different vehicle at some point in the future. You know that I'm going to. It's probably gonna go on that C10 right behind the camera right now. All right, you guys, this is it. We are finally down at the dyno. We are down at a company called Arc Flash in Bend, Oregon. We're gonna put this thing on the rollers. He actually has an all-wheel drive dyno down here. Clearly, we don't need that for the Magnum. It's just rear-wheel drive, but super excited to get this thing up on the roller, see what it'll do. I do not mind telling you that I'm absolutely terrified. I have no clue how this is gonna work out, but let's get this thing up on the rollers, see what happens. All right, you guys, first run in the books. I don't know if you can hear me in here, but we got 682 foot-pounds of torque, which it spikes pretty good. I'll show you guys the dyno graph here a little bit later, but it spikes a lot right off the bat. And then it kind of tails off on the boost. So right now we're only reading about 582 horsepower. I'd like to at least crest 600 here while we're here. So I'd say, but I give a couple of clicks to the old boost controller there. We'll see if we can't bump it up just a little bit and see what we can do on run number 2. All right, you guys, so we went ahead and turned the boost up just a little bit on that second run, but we actually made a little bit less power. The vehicle is still pulling about 4 degrees of timing while it's during a run, and I'm not surprised by that. You know, we've been having issues with the knock sensor pretty much this whole time. Both the knock sensors, they're acting very erratically. The Hemi knock sensors are known to be pretty sensitive, but we're thinking that because the supercharger with its mechanical noise that's happening, it could be affecting the signal as well. I really don't think I'm actually experiencing any knock, but you really don't want to play with this sort of thing. So we're gonna leave it right where it is, let it be nice and safe. I think we're gonna let the fans run on it for a little bit, try to cool that supercharger down a little bit. We're gonna make one more run, see if we can get a little bit closer to that 600 wheel horsepower mark. I gotta admit, my personal goal was to try to go for 650, but I really don't want to push the car at this time. That torque figure that we're making is pretty well insane, so that's actually pretty cool, but the horsepower number may be a little bit disappointing, but I can always turn up the boost a little bit later on. So let's let this thing cool down, give it another shot for run number 3. 591, so close to 600.
You can see that power progression, you know, the first couple of runs, and then after letting it cool off a bit.
Right, whoa, that's significantly higher.
And it's across the board.
Yeah.
So.
That's a big number difference, yeah.
Well, and it looks like it made peak power, you know, just like 5,600.
Perfect, okay, yeah. So I knew I had a pretty mild cam in this thing. So I was like, yeah, we don't really need to spin it up very much, you know, so. I'm sure if I put something a bit more aggressive in there, it'd probably make a bigger number there.
Yeah.
Looks fairly consistent with the foot-pounds of torque though. All right, you guys, that is it for us down here at Arc Flash. On the final dyno run there, we iced down the blower, tried to see if we could get over that 600 mark. We didn't quite get there. We made 591.5 horsepower on there, and we did make 705 foot-pounds of torque. So this thing is definitely an absolute torque monster. Obviously, you guys can tell that makes it pretty fun to drive. A little disappointed we couldn't kick it over that 600 horsepower mark, but honestly, I could have turned the knob a little bit more if I wanted to. I didn't want to. I wanted to drive this thing home. So those are the official numbers. You guys make of that what you will. And next time you see this car, we're going to be at the track to see what we can pull off. Now, we're going to my local track, which is only an 1/8 mile track. So obviously not a ton of data from that, but should give you an idea of what this car is capable. We'll see you at the track. All right, you guys, it's been a couple of days since the dyno. I've had a chance to actually digest the data. I know you guys probably have a few different questions about why this thing performed the way that it did. Hopefully I can answer those questions for you. Let's get into it. Now, of course, one last time, I want to give a shout out to Josh, the owner of Arc Flash here in Bend, Oregon. What a fantastic guy. Got me up onto that dyno, did a great job of getting me the information I need to actually improve this car into the future. So Josh, thank you again for that. Now, whether it's in my head or not, I can already hear a bunch of you commenters saying, man, a 392 Hemi that's supercharged and turbocharged, and it only made 591 horsepower. But I'm hoping to show you guys, we're gonna look at the dyno graph and also the data logs from the dyno runs. And hopefully from that data, I'll be able to show you guys why it made the numbers that it did. And it shows how much room there is for this combination to grow in the future. Now, one of the primary data points we're gonna be looking at here is the output from the MAP sensor, which stands for manifold absolute pressure. So of course, you're going to be reading the pressure inside the intake manifold. But that data can be a little bit misleading. So I wanna show you guys real quick why that's the case. That's right, you guys, we're back with another whiteboard segment here. We're gonna keep this one short and sweet. Now, this is regarding the MAP sensor output that we're reading. Again, it reads in KPA, and we're gonna basically translate that over to PSI so we get an idea of what we're looking at. Now, during this data log here for the dyno run, it's going to register a peak KPA number of 190, which when you convert that to PSI is 27.7. Now, that would immediately make you think, wow, you're running almost 30 pounds of boost to this engine? That's insane. But this is not accurate. You have to take away what regular atmospheric pressure is already to get the accurate boost number that you're making. Remember, anything over that atmospheric pressure is when it becomes boost and you start registering it. So what is that atmospheric pressure then? Well, if we were at sea level, it would be around 100 kPa, which equals about 14.7 psi. Now I'm at a little bit higher elevation. I'm at 3,500 feet. So my atmospheric kPa is about 87, which is about 12.6 psi. So any number we're going to see on that map sensor, we automatically have to take away 87 kPa from that, which will give us that accurate number. So if we have our peak of 190 here and we take away 87, that's going to put us right about 103 kPa, which is basically 14.9 psi, which is exactly what we were targeting here. So just remember that, because I've seen that trip people up when they watch the videos and they're like, whoa, your pressure numbers are way higher than you're saying they are. No, you have to actually minus that atmospheric pressure first, and then that will give you the accurate number you're looking for. All right, let's take a closer look at the dyno graph itself. You can see right here at the bottom of the run, that spikes to a brutal torque peak of 705 foot-pounds, and then it kind of trails off from there. The horsepower builds smoothly until it reaches a peak of 591. Now this is after, I think it was like 4 to 5 runs total, but notice something interesting about the horsepower peak there. It's at 5,500 RPM, 5,600, and then you can pretty clearly see that the power starts tailing off after that. Now the reason our power peak is all the way down at 5,500 RPM is because I went with a fairly mild camshaft. Now this one is from CFR Performance, and it's designed to operate more in the mid-range like that. Now I went with that on purpose because I didn't want a vehicle that was so top-end heavy with power and didn't have the guts down low in the mid-range. Well, as I'm sure you guys can tell with the dyno graph here, mission accomplished, and maybe a little bit too well. I could afford to lose some of this mid-range here, and it would be nice to have a little bit more top end. So I'd like to go with a more aggressive camshaft, move that power band up to where it's at least making power up to 6,500 RPM, and I guarantee I could pick up at least 30, if not 40 or 50 wheel horsepower just by putting a more aggressive cam in this thing. So that's definitely one of our limiting factors at this point as far as power production. Now let's focus on the secondary issue. Also, a quick note about the 705 foot-pounds of torque. Now, this car comes with a nag transmission, which does not have a true lockup torque converter in it. That torque converter always has some form of slippage at any given time. So one could argue that there was some torque multiplication happening there that artificially inflated this torque number. But to be honest, I'm not trying to hear that. This dyno graph says 705. I say it makes 705. And besides that, the thing drives like it makes 705. This thing hits hard. Okay, we're looking at the data log for the final dyno run here, and the number I want us to focus on right here, that is our map output. So this is a little ways into the run here. You can see we're at about 4,000 RPM, and it's reached a peak of 190 kPa. Now, as we already talked about before, when you minus the atmospheric pressure from that number, that puts us right about 14.9 psi, which is exactly what we want. But watch this kPa number here as the dyno run continues on. You can see it start to drop slowly. And then as we approach the horsepower peak, right about here, you can see it's dropped all the way down to 167. So what this means is that as the dyno run starts, we're getting that 14.9 pounds of boost that we wanted, but as the run progresses and we approach that horsepower peak, it's tailing all the way down to 11.6 psi. So we're losing 3.3 pounds of boost. That's why it's making 591 wheel horsepower. If we were able to get that 3.3 pounds of boost back, keep it at a flat and level 14.9, call it 15 psi throughout the entire run, I guarantee this thing would make 630, 640 wheel horsepower, something of that nature. But that of course begs the question, why is the boost tailing off? Now, of course, I have a theory about why this is happening, and honestly, it's probably the same thing a lot of you guys are thinking as well, and that is, as the airflow demands of this engine increase with RPM, at a certain point, I'm thinking that this supercharger might be becoming a restriction in the inlet, that it can only physically force so much air through, and it's just not quite enough to meet the demands of what the engine is asking for. So that could certainly account for why the boost is tailing off like it is. But is that accurate? I don't entirely know for sure. I do think it absolutely has a correlation with the too small camshaft that's in it right now. I'm interested to actually put a larger camshaft in this thing and see if it alleviates all of those issues or if I still have the boost tailing off even with a larger camshaft in there. Definitely a test for another day, but something I'm excited to try out. Now, I do have another alternate theory about why we're losing boost at high RPM, and to be honest, it's a lot more plausible, and in all likelihood, it's what's actually going on. And I believe that I'm having a boost control issue here. Now, the boost control in this car is very rudimentary. I'll show you that here in a moment. But I did want to mention to you guys that you saw during the street drive and during the dyno that the belt is slipping under high load situations, and that may lead you to think that the supercharger is just not spinning fast enough, and that's why we're losing a little bit of that boost pressure. But I did want to clarify that I almost think that the belt slip isn't even happening at the supercharger itself. I think it's on the alternator. Now, the reason for that is that the alternator does not have very good belt wrap on it right now, and it draws a very high load at high RPM, and this is a Cummins alternator, so it's got a lot of force there that's drawing. So I honestly think the slippage is happening there. I'll even show you now that there's belt debris on the alternator and alternator alone. So there's a good chance that the slippage is happening there and not on the supercharger. But even regardless of that, the theory says that the turbo should be able to overcome any losses in the supercharger to achieve that 14 pounds that we're targeting rather easily, and it's not doing that. So I honestly think we're dealing with some boost control issues. So let me show you what we got going on in this car. As you can see, I'm running an external wastegate on here, and it has a 7-pound spring in it currently. Then I was referencing that off of the compressor housing itself, and it was going to a manual boost controller. Now from there, it was running back to our wastegate here, and that way I could adjust that and crank it up to 14 pounds. So obviously this is a very basic system for controlling boost, and it does have some flaws. Now I want you to think about this. The signal line that is going to the wastegate right now, it has a base pressure with that spring in there of 7 psi, and then when I turn that knob, it's just restricting the signal that's going to the wastegate, so it takes more pressure to actually open the wastegate, which sounds great and sort of works in concept, but I want you to think about exhaust back pressure. I've only got a 7-pound spring in that wastegate, so if I get more than 7 pounds of back pressure in the exhaust itself, it's going to push past that spring pressure and open the wastegate. I fully believe that's what's happening here, is that my exhaust back pressure is becoming too high, it's overcoming that wastegate spring, cracking it open, and that's why we are losing that extra boost. Now there's a couple ways to solve this. Now the best way to do this is to run a MAC valve or a solenoid that actually runs compressed air to the top of the wastegate and actually assists with holding it closed until a specified boost pressure is reached. Unfortunately, because I am using a stock computer, I don't have any sort of way to do that outside of using a standalone controller just for that solenoid. So that's not a really great effective solution in my case. But I do have a relatively simple solution here to see if this is in fact my problem. And that's basically swapping out that 7 psi spring in the wastegate for a 14-pound spring. So I'll get rid of the manual boost controller, just stick that 14-pound spring in there, and hopefully that'll be enough to overcome that exhaust back pressure. I'll go out and make some pulls on the street and see if it maintains a full 14 pounds all the way through the RPM range. Now, unfortunately, I'm not going to have this done in time for this video to come out to let you guys know the results, but I am confident that this is going to work. Now, of course, the goal here is to get approximate Hellcat power out of this thing. So how much power does a stock Hellcat put out on the dyno? Well, I was trying to look it up online, and the numbers are completely all over the place. If someone had their Hellcat dynoed on a Mustang dyno, which is known to be a somewhat conservative dyno, they're putting out about 580 wheel horsepower. Now, conversely, if they're on a DynoJet dyno, which is known as a more happy dyno, they were getting around 630, 640 wheel horsepower. So the numbers could vary quite wildly. For myself, I'd rather just focus on straight math in this instance. So the car has a claimed 707 horsepower. You take 18% drivetrain loss going through an automatic, all that stuff, you're gonna end up right around 580 wheel horsepower. So we are right in the ballpark for factory Hellcat power. Guys, the truth of the matter is that even though some might say that this car underperformed for what it is, I am 100% happy with these numbers. I have no problem with it whatsoever at all. I can understand with the combination that's in there right now why it made the power that it did. And also I want to point out that I did tell my tuner right from the start to keep this thing really conservative. I don't want to put this thing on the edge at all. We're not trying to push this thing by any means. And so that's what he did. We're very soft on the timing right now, and I am 100% okay with that. He actually did send me an updated file that had a couple extra degrees in timing that I could have tried to see if it would bump it up a little bit. But honestly, I was okay with where we're at. I do not need to push this thing. It's running, it's driving. I want to keep it that way for right now. Obviously, there's room to grow in the future, and that's definitely something I'm going to do. But for right now, knowing the combination that's in there, I am 100% happy with these results. And the fact of the matter is, it's my car. That's all that matters. Hey guys, we're out here at the Madras drag strip in Madras, Oregon. This is the 8th mile track. We're gonna see what this thing can do. We're surrounded by actual race cars. I'm out here with the street car, just kind of setting a baseline, see what this thing is capable of. I cannot lie to you guys, I am absolutely terrified right now because the last time I was on track with this car, I blew the engine in the smithereens. So definitely a lot of nerves happening right now. That's part of what I'm doing here though. I gotta get out there, try to get those nerves kicked out of my stomach so that I'm not dealing with that when I actually go down to Redwood Rally. And of course, like I said, get a baseline so I know what to expect from this car. I know you guys are excited about it too. Let's get on track. Oh boy. All right, we're gonna talk about these dismal results here in a second, but first I wanna focus on the positives. Now, on the plus side of things, the car performed absolutely fantastic as far as reliability. This thing never felt like it was under any stress. There was no hiccups. I was hot lapping this thing at one point. It never got hot. And man, let me tell you, this thing really gave me some nice confidence. And that was one of the reasons that I was there, was to get the butterflies out, which I accomplished that, and to show myself that this thing is reliable going down the strip. And it absolutely did that. I think I did 7 or 8 runs on that night, and I could have done easily double that. There was almost nobody in the staging lanes. I was able to just run it back around, come right back up again, take another run. So really appreciate Madras Drag Strip there. It was a really neat place up on top of the plateau there with all the mountains, really beautiful. I will say that I don't think the prep was all that great. There was a lot of guys talking about that, but it was a random test and tune Friday night, so I can understand that. Hopefully when I do the Redwood Rally here next month, we're gonna go to some tracks that really have some good prep that they'll be working on throughout the day to keep it good, and hopefully that improves things a little bit. But have to say, really happy. I love being at the drag strip. It's one of my favorite places to be. But you guys did see those results, and especially coming off the starting line, this thing is like molasses coming off of there. So there's a few different reasons that are actually leading up to that. I do want to tell you guys that don't worry about the reaction time. Obviously, I'm slow coming off the line versus the green light. If you're new to drag racing, reaction time has no impact whatsoever on your actual time because your time does not start until your vehicle rolls forward out of the timing beam. So reaction time is irrelevant. I was not focusing on that. I was just focusing on trying to make the car leave. But unfortunately, essentially the car would just kind of bog a little bit coming off the line, and then all 700 foot-pounds would show up and it would spin the tires. And so I was pedaling it, trying to get back into it, and then the car would find some grip and rocket down towards the finish line. Now the reason for this is because this car has a stock transmission, as I mentioned, which means a stock torque converter, which is extremely tight torque converter. So I was essentially just leaving off of the foot brake, and I'll show you guys right now what RPM I was actually leaving the line at, but I know it was pretty low. All right, so looking here at the start of the run, you can see right here, this is where I'm actually foot braking it, and you can see the RPM is about 1200 RPM. That's where the torque converter is stalling at. So really not enough RPM to overcome that tall gear ratio. This is the KPA. You can see that when I go, it shoots up, spins the tires. I have to let off right there, pedal it, and then get right back into it, and away it goes. You can see that with the RPM as well. It builds, drops, and then takes off yet again. So really not conducive to fast 60-foot times. And this vehicle has 282 gears in the back. So I was hoping that that torque would be enough to overcome that really tall gear ratio. But when you're low enough in the RPMs, it's just not able to do that. So when the car would actually leave, it would just kind of fall on its face, and then it would pick up and then spin the tires. And that's where I was fighting all night long. My 60-foot times were atrocious throughout the night. Like I said, I think I did 7 or 8 runs, and the 60-foot times were all terrible. They were all 2+ seconds, except for one run, my fastest run, which was a 1.9 second 60-foot, which is by any measure objectively terrible. Now, as you probably saw, my fastest time of the evening was a 7.85 seconds in the 8th at 92 miles an hour. Now, if you're wondering, that basically calculates out to a 12:32 quarter-mile time, which again is pretty pathetic. This car should be capable of at least a second faster than that. That's where I expect this thing to be, is 11.2, 11.3 based on the horsepower and weight. But as you guys can see, it's all in the lead. This thing, if I could get it to leave the line and stick and not spin, I think we'd actually see some much better results. But honestly, that's drag racing for you. And honestly, the best mod we can do at this point is probably a driver mod. I'm not exactly a wheel man. I'm a builder, right? I like driving the car, but I'm not gonna sit here and say I'm good at it. I am a vastly better motorcycle racer than I am a vehicle racer, but that's a pretty low bar to just step over, essentially. So someone else who has a better experience would probably get some better results out of this thing. What do you guys think? What are some options that I might be able to do to improve my skill set with what I have here before I go to the track the next time? Give me some options that are out there. I know I should probably be doing a bit more of a burnout with these drag radials, really get them heated up a little bit more, especially because they are still pretty new. But outside of that, I don't really have any great ideas. So if you guys have some tips, go ahead and throw those my way. I'll definitely give them a shot, try them out. Now, I'm not gonna lie to you guys, when I watched back the footage of this thing on the drag strip, I was pretty disappointed. It looks so slow, it's ridiculous, and it actually depressed me a little bit. I was like, how can I put this footage out there? But then I realized that that's real life, right? We don't always get the results we're immediately hoping for. Sometimes you gotta fight for it a little bit more, and that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna put the time in, I'm gonna put the effort in, because I wanna see this car achieve its full potential and get those times that I know it can do. Now the question is, am I gonna make that into another video to show that to you guys? I'm not really sure. I don't know if I wanna do that. You guys let me know in the comments. Do you wanna see more from this car? Do you wanna see me extract the full potential out of it? We'll find out. I'm not sure yet. Spoiler alert, I already bought and installed this FTI torque converter. Now this has a 3,200 RPM stall. Should help this thing leave the line a lot better. I couldn't go to the Redwood Rally with it leaving off the stock converter. It was just so slow leaving the line. So I've been out messing around with this thing on the street a little bit, trying to get a feel for it, but there's nothing quite like to track. So day 0 at the Redwood Rally, they're going to be having a test and tune, and that'll be my first opportunity to try to get this thing to leave and see what kind of numbers it'll put out. Again, let me know if you guys want to see that or not. Now, I told you guys earlier that I would cover costs in this video. What did it cost me to actually build this car, my little Hellcat-ish type car, and was it cheaper than buying an actual Hellcat itself? Well, I'll go ahead and put on the screen the lowest price that I found for a currently available Hellcat. But this vehicle right here, one thing I do want to mention, I'm not including labor in this at all. This is what I do for fun, right? I don't go play basketball and then say, hey, I just played $500 worth of basketball. That's not how that works. This is fun for me. We're not counting labor at all. We're just counting parts cost and the cost of the vehicle, all of that. Now, I am including the newer engine that I put in here, both of them. But I don't have an exact number for you guys, but I do have an approximation. The overall total for this car is between $23,000 and $25,000 that I've invested in this thing. And I shouldn't use that word invested, that's a terrible word. More like a black hole that I threw that money into. It is a fun car, it's a cool car, it's definitely different. You're not gonna see a whole lot out there like it. And I'm still happy with the way the car came out, even as much as I put into it. But with those things being said, that is going to be the end of this video, the wrap up on the Twincharged Magnum. It's been an over 2-year process to get it to at least the point we're at now. And clearly this is not the finish line. This is more like the 3/4 point because this car needs to have more development work done to it. But for you guys, I wanted to get you in this wrap up video to show you guys that it's not broken. It's working actually pretty darn well. And there's just a few more tweaks necessary to get it to that peak level. I want to thank you guys so much for, especially the ones who have watched the entire series on this thing. This has been a wonderful learning process for me. I've absolutely loved building this car. It's given me a lot of frustration, obviously, but that's cars too. I like even that part of it. I like the fact that you got to fight for it and fight through those areas of adversity. That's a lot of fun for me as well. And I'm really, really happy with the way the car came out. This thing drives so smooth, so nice, and makes great power. I can't be upset about that. So, with that being said, thank you guys so much for watching this video. Who knows? Maybe I'll see you again here on Reignited.